service. And they're generally a list of 10 guidelines. They're not really do's and don'ts. They're more recommended and not recommended, but we do follow these, not just for HRF, but also survey and planning. If I review a condition assessment that's prepared under a survey and planning grant, I need to make sure they're not recommending, demolition or, replacing original wood siding with vinyl and things like that. So among the highlights of the standards are repairing rather than replacing, and materials. And if you have to replace materials, we like to see you replace them in kind. We like to preserve original features and also interior spaces. We want a building to read as it did historically. So even if a school is being converted to apartments, we want to walk into the building and think, oh, this was once a school, even though now, the classrooms have been converted to apartments. Erin mentioned supporting, building trades. We really like to see distinctive construction techniques preserved, because once those are gone, if the expertise no longer exists, that's an architectural feature that we can't learn from anymore. So we also, if you're planning to paint your building, for example, we want to know how you're treating the building or preparing it for paint. No harsh treatments such as, power washing or, chemical treatments. We also see sometimes, not also, but, buildings that have accrued later additions or features that are, especially if they're over 50 or 100 years old, they've acquired their own significance. So we don't like to see removal of features that may not be original, but are nonetheless historic. And that's sometimes a subject of conversation. And we also don't like to see recreation, or not actually recreation, but sort of subjective addition of features that were never there, just to make something look, like, we've seen, board and batten siding on a Greek revival house. That's not appropriate. It never was there. We don't like, we don't recommend that. I keep saying like and don't like. We don't recommend, but we also won't fund it. So I guess there is kind of a strong distinction. Anything else? I mean, Erin, that I missed?
I think you covered it, and we can provide a link to these, because I know, this is a lot of text on one slide, so we can make sure that we give you a copy of these too.
Yes, so and within the publication of the guidelines of the standards are tons of examples, of what is meant by recommended or not recommended. And they're also added to. The sustainability guidelines are actually, gee whiz, 10 or 15 years old by now, but they do address things like solar installations and energy efficiency. So they're very good resource. So, I guess before we jump into survey and planning, we can, are there any questions in the chat, Julie? Or does anybody have?
The only questions were about whether or not we were going to record the session, which we had forgotten to do for the first couple of slides, but we are now, and whether or not we're sharing the slides. And I said, yes, we could share the slides at the end of the presentation.
Yeah. Okay.
That's it.
Great.
All right.
Okay. All
Mary,
right.
want to jump in?
I will jump into the survey and planning grant program now. These are funded by the Community Investment Account. These are matching grants. Unlike the federal CLG program, we do require a match for survey and planning. They cap at $20,000. And they fund just a variety of pre-development and planning documents like National Register nominations, State Register nominations, condition assessments, feasibility studies, plans and specs. You can read the slide. We also we have a small grant that caps now at $7,500 for geophysical survey of human burials. These are used by owners or friends of historic cemeteries to try to identify, because gravestones shift over time, or sometimes even more drastic things happen, like somebody will put a road through a cemetery. And so we're offering that grant to do certain types of ground penetration, well, not disturbance, but like radar, to determine where burials are, so that cemeteries can kind of, get get a better idea of how to identify those. Things that do not require a match are state and national register nominations, or hiring someone to do those, and also our historic resource inventories do not require a match. They do cap at 20,000. We used to go up to 30,000, but again, for budget reasons, we've had to cut back, but they do not require a match. I guess that's it for that slide.
All right.
And then, as I said, we have certified local government grants, which I did talk about. But I guess this just kind of goes more into what we fund, which would be, we've funded a lot of like charrettes where stakeholders in a town will get together to talk about an historic resource that's underused or vacant, to try to figure out what to do with that building. Figure out what needs it has and how it might be reused. Those are very valuable, and that would be funded under the CLG program. Okay, so I'd like to give you some tips. I want to kind of go through the application and just give you some pointers on, because I do see some misunderstandings of questions, so I'm hoping to clarify. The new app and guidelines begin with the guidelines, and it's very important to read the guidelines because they will provide you with a lot of information on what's required or how to fill out a certain component. Okay, next slide. So just fill in all the blanks, and very few items are not applicable. A lot of people forget their federal employer ID number. Everybody has one, whether you're a nonprofit or a municipality. Sometimes nonprofits don't think they have one because they're not a business per se, or, so make sure we have that. And then if you're not, and then obviously check off what grant activity you're applying for. And sometimes I get questions. Pre-development studies is usually the main one for my grants, if you want a condition assessment or plans and specs or a feasibility study. Next. So the brief description, sometimes people get a little off track and start, I can read a brief description and not know what exactly the project is going to be, because maybe it will just explain about the resource itself or future plans. So and I think people feel like they need to fill in all the spaces, but I believe I actually limited the number of characters in the brief description, just so that I can get a concise idea of what you're applying for. ABC organization is requesting funds to hire a qualified historical architect to prepare a condition assessment for XYZ building. That's all we need to know on the application form. So we don't have to get into a lot of detail there. Sometimes people mistake date of construction. We'll just go back one more. I'm sorry. Sometimes date of construction means when the resource was built, not when you hope to start rehabilitation. So try not to jump ahead. I know a lot of these applications are going to support an HRF application, but try to focus on the project that this application is addressing and that this funding will fund. So date of construction means when was the property built. And if you're not sure of your designation status, either call or email, or we have Congress now, our online database, and you can just look up an address and it will tell you what its designation status is. Also, total project cost. Again, some folks, if this is a feeder application to the HRF program, they'll say, okay, we're asking 20,000 for this grant and the total project cost is 3.5 million. I'm like, there's no condition assessment that's going to cost 3.5 million. I just want to know the total project cost for this particular project that you're applying for funding for. So that's another, misunderstanding. Next slide. So the application checklist, make sure you go over every item, and again, not much is really not applicable. Some people think the certified resolution is not applicable. We need a certified resolution, which the application explains. I'm trying to think. Yeah, so just make sure this will help you. Some people don't provide photographs for certain projects, but pretty much any project can use a photograph, and I will go into that in a little more detail later. So next slide. So the project abstract should be just no more than 1 page. It can be a half a page. It can expand on your brief description. So you can speak a little bit more about, you know, why you need a condition assessment, or, you know, how you got to this point of applying for the grant. But again, it doesn't have to be long. It's just basically going to take everything that you talk about further and just kind of put in a little concise message. Next slide, please. And then the project narrative. This is all these questions are in the guidelines. You should really try to answer every question and be thoughtful, but don't overthink it. For example, the third bullet from the bottom, what product will be produced with the grant funds? Honestly, if it's a condition assessment, just say condition assessment. Some folks think we're looking for more than that, but I put that question in there because I just want to make sure I understand what you want, and you frankly understand, you know, what this project is going to produce. It's important to talk about the issue that the project is addressing and how it was identified. So if you are asking for a condition assessment, you might talk about known issues. And why do you want a condition assessment? It might be because you know there are issues that you want to get funding for down the line. So just make sure you talk about that one. And, you know, when you described your organization, primary mission, and key activities and community you serve, that's where you should really shine. You should really just brag about yourself or your organization, because it helps us understand how this funding is going to benefit the community at large. You know, so if you're a church and you know, feed thousands of people a year, it's good to say that, because we know that if we can put a roof on your church, then you can continue to help people, you know, things like that. Or if you are a house museum and you'd like more visitation, you know, anything we can do to help put that house museum not back into service, but to do any rehab so that you can increase your visitation. You know, it's good to know what activities you hope to provide for the community. So yes, just please make sure you answer every question. But and if you're really stuck and you really don't know what we're looking for, just give me a call or an email and I'll be happy to discuss it with you. Next slide, I think. And then the budget, you know, very often all the funds are just going to go to the consultant, and it's fine to say that. Just make sure you list what type of consultant. If it's for plans and specs or a condition assessment, it should be an historical architect. If it's for a National Register nomination, it should be an architectural historian or historian. So, so if it's a matching grant, then, you know, and you're asking for 20, the grant share would be 20, the applicant share would be 20 or whatever. And then the total would be 40. You don't have to use it all for consultant fees. If you anticipate needing supplies or other things, you can put that in there. You just need to specify. We don't accept in kind, or we can't accept in kind, but you can use up to 10% for administrative, which can include supplies, but they have to be real cost incurred. So if you're paying someone, like if you're a town or if you're an historical society that has a paid executive director, and you're paying that person to manage the project, just track the hours and you can use up to 10% of the grant to pay that portion. And if you say something like, you know, printing $500, just tell me, you know, what you're going to get for that. How many copies? Is it going to be color or black and white? How many pages? Just be as specific as possible. And then the narrative will also help you. I don't know if I have narrative on the next page. Can you advance just one, Erin? No,
Yep.
back up then. No, it's not on the next page. But the budget narrative is where you will explain. So if you have a line item for 500 for printing, in the narrative, say, this is what printing consists of. If everything's going to the consultant fees, and this is it's sort of chicken and the egg. You cannot pre-select a consultant, so it's often hard to find out what a project's going to cost. And so, we're sort of tracking costs. So you can say that you arrived at the amount in consultation with our office, for, we kind of discourage contacting consultants, or at least in this survey and planning grant program, contacting consultants prior to getting the grant. But we understand that it's hard to know what a project's going to cost unless you talk to the consultant that's going to do the project. So, but this is where, we can kind of help you. And also, Preservation Connecticut can also help you. The circuit riders can give you some advice. Okay, now I think next slide. And then project timeline. I believe there's a sample timeline on the website. But we'd like to see, we like to see this to make sure you have a realistic expectation of what how much time something's gonna take. If you're, like a condition assessment can take 4 to 6 months to complete. So if you're trying to shrink that, that's going to affect possibly how much the project's going to cost, because anybody that bids on it might be expediting or putting you ahead of other projects. So we just like to see if you have a realistic idea of what's going to happen. I did forget to mention earlier in the narrative that we do want you to identify which plan, goal or objective of our state plan your project will meet. And those goals and objectives are on the website. And I believe they're also in the guidelines themselves. Again, you don't have to pick a bazillion of them, but just, everything we fund has to speak to our state plan. So we'd like to know, how you think it advances our goals and objectives. All right, I think one more. Oh yeah, I promised to talk a little bit about photographs. Obviously I don't want a ton of photographs. Okay. I don't want like 164 photographs. There are guidelines there are specifications in the guidelines for what we expect. You can just take digital photos and drop them into a Word document and attach them to your application. They need to be labeled. You need to tell me what I'm looking at. You should probably have the date, the name of the historic resource, and what I'm looking at. So condition assessments, generally, we want to see photographs, but I'm talking like 10 tops. We don't need a lot. For historic resources inventories, we at least want to see a map of the area you're planning to survey, and then maybe just some representative examples of the types of architecture that you think might be in that area. Obviously, the surveys aren't focusing on a specific resource, but we definitely want to see where the area is and just some examples of what's in it. I think that's it. Okay, so before we jump into HRF, are there any more questions in the chat, Julie?
Yes, we received a few questions.
Okay.
The first that came through was with regards to examples of feasibility studies and historic resource inventories. If maybe you could speak a little bit more about them and maybe provide copies of feasibility studies that we've accepted in the past or resource inventories.
Definitely. Yes, and I do on request. I will post some exemplary ones, but I can also send, like if a church is getting a condition assessment, I generally send specific condition, examples, that have to deal with a similar structure, or a house museum. I will post some on the website, and I can also provide them. A condition assessment is generally, anywhere between 100 and 200 pages. They're very thorough. but yes, it's a great, that's good for you to have an idea of what to expect from your consultant in the deliverable. And then HRIs, yep, those are on Congress as links, but I can definitely hold up ones that we have actually funded and that are exemplary. So yes, I will post some, but also just email me and I can send you examples directly.
And I will post Mary and Erin's email addresses in the chat, so you have those as well. Another question that came in is, can we submit funding for planning for more than one project?
So you can only have one planning grant application at a time, but if you can bundle them and it's not going to exceed the 20, I mean, I suppose. I don't know. What do you think, Erin? Is this for if it's for like an HRF grant and you need, would it be, it depends on if it's for two different resources, then probably not. But if it's for one resource, then possibly. I mean, it would just be a bundle.
I think it just depends on what the cost is for those two projects, because it wouldn't really make sense to bundle them if both of the projects exceed $40,000, because
exactly,
it's a $20,000 reimbursement. So
right. Now you can have successive applications. So if you apply for funding and you get it and you complete the project and you close it out, you can turn around and apply for another grant under the survey and planning grant. So you can have more than one conceivably in the course of a year. You just can't have them at the same time.
Okay. I can unmute the requester if he has any additional questions.
Yeah, that sounds like it might need. Yeah.
So Bruce, I'm going to unmute you. If you have, if that answers your question, that's great. But if you have if you'd like to add anything else, feel free to unmute yourself and request. Oh, I see. He responded with Lighthouse Foundation roof soffit. So that is multiple projects. It sounds like within a single building.
Oh, yeah.
So,
and it sounds like it'd be one project eventually, right? I mean, if a roof, you'd want to make sure the stuff, yeah, that
okay.
sounds perfectly reasonable.
Okay.
But again, as Erin said, if it's a $60,000, plans, we can still only give you the 20, but at least that's something. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, this is Bruce. Yep. The foundation and the roof and the soffits are all different technologies, if you will. So when we look at those and are looking for consultants and so forth, you're going to get very distinct consultants. I mean, there's people that we've had somebody that can do an engineering survey for the foundation under the water. And that's kind of a specialized thing. And then we've got somebody to repair a tin roof. And so these are all unique things. And so there's no commonality amongst them where you would bring one architect in or one construction professional to come in and say, yeah, okay, this, and this. It's three or four very unique things. So I'm just trying to get an idea of the big picture. And Mary, if, later on when I start distilling this down, you and I can talk about it.
Yeah. And sometimes, I mean, we require that you use an historical architect, and you're right. Not every architect has that, expertise in everything, but they will generally assemble a team of who they think. So they would find an underwater bulkhead specialist or something like that. They would know, and they would basically be like, not the general manager, but oversee. And you're talking about like for a condition assessment or plans and specifications. Is that what?
Yeah, we had an engineering company 15 years ago do a survey below the water line. They sent divers down, and they came back and said nothing of any consequence going on. A few items of minor concern. So that was 15 years ago, and I at this point in time, we'd like to do something like that to make sure that, because those are kinds of damages and situations that you can't see, like the roof is leaking.
Right, and that would
those kinds of
cause
things. So,
huge
there could
problems.
be, there could be some problems down there that we're completely,
Yep.
not aware of. So, okay.
I mean, then I would probably recommend just getting a grant for that, initially.
Okay.
And you could just say in the narrative, we had this done 15 years ago, everything was fine, but since this is so important to the basic, the basic safety and of the entire structure, we'd like to just look again, And
Yep.
I don't know how quickly that could be done, but that sounds like something you could apply for, get the money, finish the project, then come right back for, other components. So,
Okay.
yeah,
Appreciate that. Thank you.
sure.
So Mary, we have another question. My historic building is only 2 rooms. Does the survey and planning cost the same for small buildings? And then there's a follow-up. How do I find someone to do the survey?
Okay. And I'm assuming you're talking about a condition assessment or?
It doesn't specify.
Okay. I'll use that as an example. Yeah, conditions assessments vary by cost. And for a smaller building, I really doubt it would cost $40,000 to do an assessment. So you could probably ask for, less than that because it is matching. And then again, I mean, once you're awarded the grant, you need to hire an architect that meets the qualification standards set by the Secretary of the Interior. And you should put that in the request for proposals, which we can help you write. We know of architects that meet the criteria. They are not recommendations or endorsements. They are simply folks that have submitted their criteria and have found to meet them. You do not have to use the list. If you get proposals from an architect that's not on the list, or if there's an architect that you would like to send the proposal to, that is fine. We just need to review their credentials to make sure that they meet the criteria for historical architect. So once you get the grant, we really kind of kick into full service. We will help you draft your request for proposals so that you will be able to find the qualified consultant you need. And again, we can also provide you with information on how to find that qualified consultant. Yeah, and yes, the cost definitely varies depending on the size and complexity of the building and any known issues. So, yeah, I hope that answered it. I don't know.
Nothing else has come in, so I think you can move on.
Okey-doke. Thanks for those good questions.
So we will move to the Historic Restoration Fund grant, which is the grant that I administer, and it's really kind of the construction, maintenance, and repair grant. The understanding is that preservation may be slightly more expensive than modern materials and practices. So this grant aims to incentivize historic trades, techniques, and materials. So some of the projects that wouldn't be eligible would be routine maintenance, acquisition, renovation of non-historic places, building moves, new additions, those types of things. Any type of replacement would not be eligible if the fabric is not beyond repair. The types of projects that are eligible would be stabilization, protection, rehabilitation, restoration. So, this could include porches, doors, windows, chimneys, HVAC, abatement. There's quite a lot of things that the Historic Restoration Fund will cover. So to start the process, you will need to sign up for a one-on-one meeting. Beginning in January 2026, there will be a link to schedule a virtual meeting on the website, and I think Julie provided a link to the Historic Restoration Fund website. At that meeting, we will discuss your project, your budget, and sort of where you are in your planning. Just a way for us to get to know each other and get to know your project. And once we meet, I'll sort of have an idea of whether you're ready to proceed with a historic restoration fund grant, or whether you maybe need to, take a step back and work with Mary to do more planning, or, construction drawings or bid documents and things like that. So it's a good way to get an idea of where you are in the process. If you are ready to move forward, then I will send a link to our online letter of intent, which is kind of like our pre-application. And this is where you will get to know your project a little bit more in depth. So because this program is incredibly competitive, in order to stand out and sort of move to the next round, you will need to have each of these things. So the full project cost in hand, an itemized scope of work, names of the project team, conditions assessment, plans and specs, and some design drawings. You don't need to have construction documents at the time of the letter of intent. And there's some wiggle room here if you're in the process of closing out a survey and planning grant, that helps you, apply for the Historic Restoration Fund grant. And we know that you'll have that done in time for the full application, where we have some wiggle room here. So these are the things that are required. For the pre-application, we do have scoring, and the major scoring priorities are the project urgency, the public use, the timeline, and compliance with any state requirements. So for example, if there's ground disturbance, we would want you to make sure that you reach out to our staff archaeologist. So we really want to know that this project is urgent and why it's urgent. Was it deferred maintenance? Was there an emergency that occurred? Was there, a weather event that affected the building? We want to know about the public use of the building, because we want to make sure that the state funding is reaching as many folks in Connecticut as it can. So we want to hear about all the ways the public is using your building, whether it's a soup kitchen or a public meeting place, or what kind of events are going on there. So we know that this funding is reaching as many people as we can. So if you are selected after your pre-application to move forward, because the HRF funding rounds are so competitive, SHPO created a scoring system that will be used by SHPO staff, Preservation Connecticut circuit riders Mike Farino and Stacy Barrow, and the Historic Preservation Council members. So we'll dive into some of the different areas now. And the first evaluation criterion is based on technical information about the proposed projects. So I'll have several slides that will cover the requirements of this criterion. This is just sort of an overview. And in this portion of the application, a competitive applicant will provide as much detail as possible. So an itemized scope of work with associated costs is required. And make sure that the scope of work meets the Secretary of the Interior standards that Mary talked about earlier in the presentation. Design development drawings, engineering reports, plans and specifications, and any relevant documentation should be provided. And this is why the survey and planning grant is a great first step to be prepared for the Historic Restoration Fund application. So Mary and I work really closely together to make sure that you have all of the documents you need in order to be able to upload them and work on the Historic Restoration Fund application. So here's a look at the application. The application is all done through an online platform. A link is provided if an applicant is invited to apply based on their letter of intent. In this portion of the application, you will introduce your organization and the project funding request should not exceed $200,000. That's the maximum amount that we're able to award for Historic Restoration Fund grants. The request should be for half of the project cost unless the project cost exceeds $400,000. And so we'll also make sure that you write a concise one-sentence description of the project and include the person that will be the point person between SHPO and your organization for the grant. Photographs are required and I would like to see lots of them, kind of in contrast to Mary's grant application. Because the reviewers won't be able to visit the site, the pictures should serve as a tour of the building and a close-up of the project area. So each resource and project are different, so some of these photographs may not be possible, but do your best to represent the project and the resources. Imagine that you're sort of taking us on a tour of the building. So just to get in depth a bit more on criteria 1, SHPO recommends retaining an architect, engineer, or professional to outline plans and specifications for the proposed project. This project will need to go out to bid, and bid documents can be challenging to create without professional experience. We ask that you upload project drawings, which should include dimensions that a contractor can base their bid for materials from. Design development drawings should be about 80% complete. Construction drawings do not need to be completed at the time of the application, but seeing a draft is helpful. So uploading the construction drawings is optional. A detailed budget is required to demonstrate how the costs identified in the budget are necessary, reasonable, and allowable. Grant funding can cover costs of materials and construction labor necessary to ensure preservation, safety, and accessibility. But the grant can't cover design development drawings or condition assessment. That's when we'll have you work with Mary to get those done before you apply. But the fees relating to the development of bid documents and construction drawings, as well as a project manager, can be used as a grant match. But in-kind services such as volunteer hours can't be used as a match. So for criteria 2, you will need to submit a conditions assessment and maintenance plan. Many organizations have formal plans completed by an architectural or engineering firm. But if your organization doesn't, we do have some requirements for each. I think I might have put them. No, I didn't put them in here. So we can work with you to develop one, but it really would be beneficial if you worked with Mary on a survey and planning grant to get a really thorough condition assessment and maintenance plan. The reason we request these items is to ensure that we're funding the highest priority project that your organization has. So, for example, if there's a hole in the roof that's actively leaking, it wouldn't make sense for SHPO to fund interior plaster repairs. So we want to make sure you're following the condition assessment with the highest priority, and you know how to carry that condition assessment forward with a solid maintenance plan. For criterion 3, one of the major scoring areas is project urgency and public benefit of the resource. So again, we want to understand how this became an urgent project, whether it's deferred maintenance, storm damage, or issues with a previous repair failing. We want to be sure we are addressing urgent projects that might be causing safety hazards or limiting the public from using the building. But we also want to make sure that the proposed project mitigates the threat and that it doesn't happen again. Oops. I'll just go back here. To demonstrate public support and benefit, we do want you to reach out to your local leaders, state representatives, and state senators. We want there to be an investment in the project, and we want you to develop a strong relationship with them. And in turn, we hope they become advocates for the Community Investment Act. For criterion 4, if the project involves ground disturbance, is in a local historic district under a local historic district commission purview, or if there's any other funding sources that require compliance, SHPO wants to ensure that you're meeting those requirements. But if the resource doesn't require any compliance, the applicant will automatically get a point. Lastly, we want to be sure that the projects that SHPO funds hits the ground running as soon as funding is awarded, and that the organization has the capacity to ensure the project starts and finishes on time. So you will need to upload an operating budget, a legal opinion that a preservation restriction can be placed on the property, and an authorization statement from the board or governing body that the organization can apply for and accept the grant. SHPO will also need to see a bank statement or some kind of proof that the entire project cost is in hand. So keep in mind that this is a reimbursement grant that is paid at the completion of the project. So if an organization has a $400,000 project, the organization would need to pay the $400,000 to contractors before the state can reimburse for our half of the project costs, or $200,000. So one thing I mentioned was the preservation restriction. And as a condition of funding only for the Historic Restoration Fund grant, not for survey and planning, grant applicants must agree to execute and record an interior and exterior preservation restriction. Some organizations might already have a preservation easement on their property from SHPO, and if your organization does, an additional time amount will be added to the easement if you're awarded a grant. The duration of the easement is dependent upon the amount of funding awarded. So you can see some of the periods here. $0 to $20,000 is a 5-year preservation easement, and it goes up to 20 years for a $200,000 grant. And Julie, who is on this meeting, is the manager for the easement program. So I think I'll stop here and take some questions.
So we did get a couple.
Okay.
Would the process be to get a planning grant to better define what would be submitted as an HRF request? So I think if you could just speak to, just again, the connection between the survey and planning grant as a feeder for HRF.
Yes. So to have a really competitive HRF application, it's really beneficial to have a survey and planning grant. And like Mary said, you can apply, multiple times after you close out one grant. So a lot of times we'll see an organization complete a condition assessment and take that list of priorities, take the maybe top 3 priorities, and develop plans and specifications with design drawings or construction documents or bid documents. And having all of those documents, kind of calls out exactly what you are going to be doing in your Historic Restoration Fund grant and how you're going to be accomplishing them. And it just makes a really strong application. So I definitely recommend, working with Mary to receive funding for those design drawings or plans and specs for the Historic Restoration Fund grant. And Mary, I should let you chime in too. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, sometimes folks will call Aaron and me, and they might have a condition assessment. And if it's not too old, we might be able to, it won't support an HRF grant application, but maybe you don't have to go back and do another one. However, this is a kind of a long answer. We offer non-matching grants for plans and specifications that are going to support the HRF grant application. The problem is you need to hire an historical architect who is ready to jump in. Sometimes if you have a condition assessment prepared by one architect, you need to keep working with that architect for the plans and specs because they did the initial investigation work. However, at that point, you have to prove that you competitively selected the architect for the condition assessment. So sometimes it's better just to start from scratch. I mean, we do offer funding to help you through this. And unfortunately, the plans and specs grants also cap at 20, but if for some reason your plans and specs are only going to cost $18,000, that's a non-matching grant, and we can give you the full amount, with no money out of your pocket. Again, we'd like to do more, but because of budgeting at this time, we can't. So if you have like a 10-year-old condition assessment, it's probably not going to be, we're probably going to want you to, refresh that. And you might as well come in for a grant. So I forgot to mention the non-matching plans and specs grants, but there are specific requirements for that.
Yeah, and so in those one-on-one meetings, kind of in advance of this in January, I'll sort of ask some prompting questions, and I can steer you in Mary's direction if I think it would be helpful for you to take a step back and do a survey and planning grant. because it would be helpful for your HRF application.
Yeah, this is Bruce Buckley. I just asked that question. The example I always use is the roof leaks. Do I need to patch the roof? Do I need to replace the roof? And when I replace the roof, do I need to replace all of the infrastructure that supports the roof? And all three of those, depending upon some expert coming in and give me an appraisal, is the magnitude of significance between the three. So that's why I'm trying, whatever gets submitted for you to you guys as an HRF has to define of those three what we're going to do.
Right.
So that was, and I've got a couple of those situations. So
Good example.
yeah, the roof and soffits and stuff like that. So.
So,
But thank you very much. You've explained exactly what I was looking for.
So we have another question. Somebody who has been invited to apply to the HRF grant is on the online application portal, but doesn't see where the HRF grant application is located on that portal. Do you have an ability to share a screen for that right now, or should we have them give you a call separately offline?
Yeah, why don't you send an email? Typically what happens is the either the executive director or sort of the head of the organization has the application login, and then they can invite collaborators on the application. So you might want to have, if you have I can't tell who it is. Oh, James Merrillhouse. Yeah, so you might want to have Cynthia log in and add you as a collaborator. But just email me and I can double check.
Okay. Great. Does the project need to be completed in the calendar year that they receive the grant? Is there a timeline?
We will have our contracts for 2 years. We would really like to see you complete it as quickly as possible, because these grants are so competitive. It would be a real shame if, we issued a grant and somebody kind of sat on it for a couple of years when there was somebody else that was ready to go. So 2 years is the length of the contract, and we don't want to see it go any longer than that.
Okay.
But if your project, shovel ready and you have your match in place, there shouldn't be a problem. You should be ready to hit the ground.
Right.
Sorry.
That's
No,
okay.
it's great.
No. We got a question about easements. I put my email address in the chat if you have any questions about your easement, or if you have an easement already, or if you don't know what it means and what it would look like, just send me an email and we can schedule a time to talk. And then there's the final question, it appears, is can a conditions assessment be up to 9 years old?
I think that's one of those scenarios where we'll take a look at it and see how detailed it is and compare the, pictures and things we can
I
see.
mean, a lot can happen in 9 years. So there's no guarantee that what's in that condition assessment is still the actual state of the, where's the line? Then maybe we should just say condition assessment within the last year. I mean, it really does have to be pretty accurate. Or I guess, as Erin said, it depends on what's covered in the assessment. And I mean, if you needed a new roof 9 years ago, then you probably still need a new roof now. But there might be something else in the report that says, oh, this is fine. And it's not all of a sudden because of, so, maybe we want to start with an update of the older condition assessment.
I think the point there is that we're trying to kind of save you some money too, because if you have an older condition assessment and you do, the repairs that were suggested 5, 6, 7 years ago, you may find that those aren't going to work anymore, and you end up having to spend more money undoing those and doing them the right way. So we're just trying to make sure you're really prepared and have the current information so that you're saving yourself money and time and effort, and doing the right thing currently. So I think, in terms of a line, we can't say here, we just want to see your condition assessment, and maybe, Mary and I can even do a site visit and see how things are looking too. So it's sort of case by case basis, which is, I know, sometimes a painful answer. What do we have left? So we can talk about next steps. Oh, no, there's another question.
If an organization has received an HRF grant in the past, are all of the items on the checklist still required, i.e. copy of the deed, etc., or is there a different application which prevents duplication?
For some of the things that are not going to sort of expire or change, we can reuse them, but some things that need current dates, we'll have to get again, like a certified resolution to apply for the grant and things like that. But, the deed isn't going to change, I don't think, especially if you have an easement. So we don't want you to have to duplicate and, I think both Mary and I can probably reuse, like, your narrative, a history of the building's not going to change and things like that. But it makes it a lot easier for the reviewers if you can just copy and paste it all into one place, because, they're logging on and looking at that one application. So it certainly helps us and is a lot easier, but.
Erin, if I could just point out, it really depends on how old the previous application is.
Yes.
If it falls outside of our record retention policy,
True.
we won't have it, and it would
Right.
need to be resubmitted. So just something to consider.
Yep.
And this is not exactly, although this does come up, I forgot to talk about the submitting your W-9 and agency vendor form and direct deposit form. And the reason I'm bringing that up now is because some folks will say, oh, you've got one on file, but you might have been deactivated in the state comptroller system because it's, 10 or 15 years old. And I also, while we're on that subject, just want to explain that the W-9 and the agency vendor form are filled out with your organization's information. Some people think it's for the person they're going to hire, but it's for you, so that we can set you up in the state comptroller system, quote, as a vendor, quote, so that we can pay you. We can pay you, it's a grant, but we are essentially paying you. So, so those documents are filled out with your information, not whoever you're going to hire or have hired, just for clarification.
And I think it's important to remember that, SHPO and Preservation Connecticut staff will do the first review and narrow it down, but ultimately the Historic Preservation Council is the sort of the final say to approve the grant funds. So all of this is in an effort to make it as easy as possible for the Historic Preservation Council to review these grants. And the Historic Preservation Council is a group of about 10 to 15 architects, engineers, museum professionals, construction experts that review these grants to make sure that the projects look good to them and will be successful. And they meet once a month. So that kind of feeds into our schedule here. So I'll let Mary take that.
Okay. So survey and planning grants and certified local government grants are accepted on a rolling basis as long as funds are available. As Erin just said, they are considered on the first Wednesday of the month. Sometimes that Wednesday shifts to the second, depending on if there's a holiday or something. So maybe check our schedule that's online. And once they're awarded, the grant's been awarded, and then we can start in with, doing a contract and drafting a request for proposals and moving forward with the project. So, as long as funds are available, we maxed out last year. We didn't fall short, or we didn't have to turn anybody away, but because funds are limited, it is, you need to really submit a competitive application in order to be considered. So I believe that's it for,
All
my
right.
schedule.
And then mine is long, but I just, so this is last year's schedule, but it follows the same schedule every year. It's a yearly application. So in January, we'll have those one-on-one meetings where we'll get to know each other in the project. If you're invited to submit a pre-application, it'll be due the end of March. You'll be notified in mid-May if you are invited to submit a full application. We'll have a workshop where we go through exactly what's required in the full application. So we just go step by step through each question of the application. I think we have this recorded too on our YouTube channel, so you can see what it's like. Applications are due mid-October. We'll review them and let you know end of November if you've been selected to be placed on the Historic Preservation Council agenda in January. And then they will vote there if you are awarded funding. We'll have another post-application workshop in middle to end of February where I'll guide you through contracting, the bidding process, the CHRO requirements, and project management. Again, I think that's on YouTube as well if you want to take a look at that. And then construction should start, soon after. So we have our meeting in February. We would hope that you go out to bid maybe in March and start your project May, June, around the building season. And then I do monthly check-ins. So we'll make sure that construction is going smoothly. It doesn't have to be every month, but it seems helpful to folks. And then all projects must be completed in 2 years. So that's the lengthy HRF schedule. But that's that. Yes, and I see 2 people that just corrected me. Yep, the deadline is not the 17th. We extended it to, I think, the 24th or 25th. So I need to update on the website. And then the Urban Action Program, I'm not sure who the contact is for that.
Do you
I'm not,
know?
I'm not sure either. We will look it up and get back to Bruce.
It's not through the SHPO office, so.
Right. Yeah. It's someone in small business, I believe.
Current HRF folks, October 24th. I didn't mean to cause panic. So that's it for our presentation. But we have some time left. Happy to answer questions.
Maybe we could, since the presentation's over, maybe we could open it up if anyone wants to raise their hand and ask a question.
Sure.
All right.
So Sheila.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm not very good at chat and typing. I'm terrible at it. So you mentioned documents that are required, like the resolution, and they should be current. And I would assume that those documents, current documents, would include letters of support as well, or should we get? Okay, I just want to be sure.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't mind explaining, because a lot of people are not always familiar with what the certified resolution is. And what that is a certification that your governing board has met and authorized someone to sign the funding agreement between us and your organization. Usually the secretary will, so it will say, we met on this date and we authorized this person and their title to sign. It's pretty simple, but you do have to meet. It does have to be a record that you met and authorized someone, so that we know that whoever's signing that funding agreement is, that we can, we know that we're not signing you up for something that you don't know about. So,
Yeah.
so that's an assurance.
Carl,
It's like,
you
yeah.
can unmute
Oh,
yourself.
good. So I never get to see you guys, all right, but I email you often, all right? I did send you the results of the surveying and planning grant this morning, the draft,
Oh,
right? To
great.
see if there's any issues there.
Okay.
And there's 3 documents. There's the condition assessment, the estimates, and then the proposed elements to the RFP that we need to send out for the contractors to actually do the work after we get the HRF grant, right?
Okay.
But then on the HRF grant, Aaron, I know we've been going back and forth. Was it Father Tito that was added to access the portal? Because I just looked again and it doesn't show the HRF grant under my listing. And I can have Father add me as a collaborator, I guess, but it should be me. He's not
Okay.
really going to.
He's not on there, so
Because I
I
just
would,
looked again and it's not called HRF grant for sure. There's 5 others that are listed, but not that one.
okay. Yeah, I'll take a look at that when we're off this meeting and
All
let
right,
you
thank
know.
you. It's great to see you guys and actually talk to you.
Yes.
So thank
That's
you
why
for
we like
putting the
having these
time.
meetings. They've been great.
Yeah. Thank you.
We got another question in the chat about ADA requirements for the building. They had a condition assessment that put a high priority on ADA requirements. Could you please address how those improvements impact the historic integrity of the building in general?
It
I think
depends
it's
on
more of a standards question.
yeah. So the condition assessment is making the recommendation. And so if you want to move forward with that recommendation, we would recommend that you hire an historical architect, you can get a grant from us, to design the access. And if that design meets the standards, then, we would fund it. I mean, that's the whole point of working within the standards and using an historical architect that has experience with introducing access to an historic building, which, provides what's needed, without substantially, negatively impacting the building, the resource itself. I'm sorry, Aaron, you say something
Nope,
too.
that's how I would have answered it. It's great. Yeah.
And
So
there is a brief on making historic buildings accessible. So
I'm
if you
looking
want to
for that
familiar-
brief. I'm
Okay.
looking for it. If I can find it quickly, I'll add it to the chat.
Okay.
And just to add on, as Mary said, once you have those, kind of preservation sensitive documents and drawings to incorporate ADA compliance, it's an eligible project for HRF that we would absolutely fund.
I will say, I mentioned the non-matching grant for architectural plans and specifications. There's just a few specific requirements. The reason we're offering them as non-matching is to assist you with the HRF process. But another benefit is that if you have already gotten a grant for a condition assessment and have competitively selected your historical architect, you can just jump right into the planning grant for plans and specs. You don't have to send out another RFP to hire, to find somebody. However, if you did not get the condition assessment funded by us and you did not competitively select a qualified architect, you will have to do, go through the RFP process. So there's a little bit of, there are some conditions that have to be met in order for the grant to be non-matching.
I just put in 2 links for ADA improvements to historic buildings.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron.
Yep. I fixed Carl's application. That's what.
And I am confirming receipt of your documents, Carl, so I'm looking forward to reading them.
Any other questions?
Nothing in the chat.
Thank you. It's a lot of information that you sat through, so thank you. And we did record it, so we can send out a recording, I think through Teams, and then we also have to upload it to our YouTube channel in order to be able to share it with folks that weren't on this meeting. So we'll work on that within
do
the
that.
next day or two,
Yeah.
and send it to everybody on the meeting list.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have 2 people that were not able to be here that I'll send it to.
Great. Good to see you too, Regan.
Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
All right,
Thanks,
bye-bye.
everyone. Have a good
Well,
rest of
thanks,
your day.
everybody. Thank
All
you for
right.
coming. Did Aaron leave?
I think so.
Okay. All right. I guess I'll sign off. Okay. All right. I will work on getting that recording on YouTube. I want to look at it to make sure there's not like 8 minutes of dead air and then us chatting, you know.
No,
But what you
it's,
just, yeah.
no, we started a new one.
Okay.
But we missed a couple slides, so it should all be up there. It should,
Okay.
most of it should be there, but I will turn it
Okay.
off right now because the meeting's over.
Okay. Okay, good. And then I'll get that up and then we can send the link to the YouTube channel and bada bing.